Hi guys, so today I'm coming to do a review of 1984 by George Orwell. This is a piece of classic literature that I have been wanting to read for ages. It's one of those things, strangely enough, I never studied during English at school, but it seems to be one of those books that quite a lot of people have studied in the past for like their English literature, language, whatever. So we are in this sort of totalitarian world, country, state of Oceania, where we have this concept of Big Brother is always watching you. He is this big mustachioed man whose face is plastered on every poster. There's telly screens just watching your every movement. You can see what's going on the screen, but they can, like, as in what they want you to see, but they can see you, listen into you, see if you're committing any sort of crime. You are following a strict regime of everything that basically goes into this Big Brother persona. Everything leads back to that power dynamic. It's a very triangular structure where all the Big Brother and the party, they call these people the inner party, who's up there with the elite, are at the top. You've got like the party members, who are like the general workers that feed into this big conspiracy, and underneath that you have these people called the proles, who are just like the general everyday workers, who are kind of, in my opinion, considered like slaves to an extent, but funnily enough they're the most free people there are. Makes sense when you read it a bit more. So we are following our main character, Winston Smith, who grew up in a time, actually, he remembers before any of this very strict future. Like, they rewrite history and act like nothing before had happened. As soon as they say this doesn't work in our favour, erase it, it's gone. No one remembers it, no one chooses to remember it, but he remembers a time before this. And even thinking like that, especially in the profession that he's in, where he's actually rewriting history for Big Brother, thinking anything against that, anything against Big Brother, remembering a past where Big Brother hasn't accepted that and he's not wanted that to be acknowledged, is in itself a crime. It's called thought crime, think crime, and he's already committed to that because he does not agree with how Oceania and Eurasia and East Asia, I think they call it, is. He remembers a time where everyone was much freer, and he believes this is wrong to an extent. He doesn't understand why people choose to live this way, and it's difficult. So he's already sort of committed to this crime in itself by thinking these things, and he knows now any minute, any second, any year he's going to get caught, because everybody gets caught eventually. So he takes it upon himself to go to the proles sort of district where they sort of live and have their little businesses and stuff like that, which is very unorthodox for someone of a party membership to go into those areas. And he decides to get some things that are basically forbidden. He picks up a diary and he writes all of these crime thoughts down, and he's like, I've already committed to this, I'm going to get caught eventually, I'm just going to write it all down. And through this you see even more his thoughts, how he feels about this sort of regime that is happening, how he feels. Everything's sort of centered around this war that's happening. So Oceania is always at war with one of the other two big sort of states. I'm just calling them states, I don't know if that's the correct word to use. And whenever something switches and they're at war with Eurasia, for example, it's like they rewrite it to say that they've always been at war with Eurasia ever since they can remember, always. But he knows that's not the case. Before that they were allied with Eurasia and they're at war with this, and he just doesn't understand. Is this just a never-ending war? What gain is it? Why is this happening? It's a really interesting book. Now, take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt, because as I say, I didn't study this at school. I don't have any further learning, any further sort of qualification in English other than a GCSE. I didn't take it any further, although I did love English and studying it at the time. I went on to do more vocational qualifications. I didn't do A-levels, I went straight to like my animal science course. But yeah, so what I'm saying is, take what I say lightly because I don't have maybe the in-depth analytical kind of processing as other people might have when it comes to talking about particularly classics. So yeah, this is just from a normal person's perspective that enjoys reading. So I've sort of gone over the synopsis of it a little bit. I've kind of blabbed a little bit actually, and I've talked a little bit about our main character Winston. Now let's talk about what I felt, what I enjoyed about the story, which was everything. I actually gave this a 5 stars. I really did enjoy it. It's one of those things where I feel like I can't even pinpoint what genre it would be. Obviously it's known to be a classic. I don't know if it's a modern classic or just a classic, but that's like the main sort of thing. But I'd say it's also very contemporary because there's a lot of points in this that are scarily so very relevant even in today's climate world. You know, how many years has passed since this book was first published, first written, and you're still seeing a mirror image of a lot of things happening today, particularly like in politics and stuff like that. As well as that, it's very political. I'd say there's an aspect of science fiction because of this science fiction dystopian, because of the sort of altered world. When you think of it, it is kind of like a altered universe to what we have. Possibly could have happened if things progressed that way, and possibly could still happen to some extent. And also very horrifying as well, because the whole structure of this Big Brother is always watching you. You don't have a free will to do anything. You literally following day by day the tasks you are set, and if you go off of that task you are unorthodox and they're gonna come after you. That's scary. I don't know how I would not live on edge if that was how the world was today. And I know in some countries even still that's something very similar that is actually happening. So I'm very grateful and thankful that I live in a country where it's not like that, at least at the minute. So yeah, that to me is horror. So it falls into a lot of categories. So I feel like this is something, if you have an interest in it and you're like, I'm not sure if it's for me, if you like any of those sort of genres, you'll probably like this because it fits so perfectly in everything. So I feel like it's one of those books that everyone needs to read because you're going to get something from it, you know, whether big or small, you're going to get something from it. Another thing, as I was speaking, I remembered that there's this concept as well where they have this certain language. It's called Newspeak, and it felt like a real language. I was reading the part at the back which goes into like the linguistics of it, how it was created and that, and even then I felt like it was a real language. I might just be naive, so I googled it. And yeah, it's definitely a made-up language for this book, but it just had so much work put into it that it felt real. So the concept of Newspeak is that each year this new dictionary comes out, or I don't know if it's each year or every couple of years, and they are basically, in most cases, abbreviating a lot of words, but they're also completely erasing words that they feel are unnecessary. And with doing that, they're lessening obviously the English vocabulary, but they're also lessening the process of thinking. They're making their people dumber and dumber so that they follow this particular regime very linearly, is that the word? Very perfectly, I guess. They can't think. They basically want to write out the idea of thought crime because you can't possibly think any of those words because they don't exist anymore. It's really complex, and I feel like you'd understand it more if you read it. I'm probably not doing much justice, but I just thought that in itself was so interesting to read, so scary, and also you actually see a little bit of how they go about doing that process, how they come out with dictionaries every so often of the new language, where less and less of the English language exists. And I don't know, it's phenomenal. It's such a good book. I really did want to do a video review, knowing full well that I probably wouldn't be able to speak as eloquently as other people when it comes to this sort of literature, but it's like I can't not talk about it. Even now, I read this, maybe I finished it when I'm filming it the weekend before or the weekend before that, and it's still on my mind. Like, I'm so glad that I actually read this in my later years, because I think if I'd have picked this up not when I was in school, like if I was studying in school, yeah, you'd have the teacher there to sort of help you understand things, and I think I would have liked it, because we did read a bit of Animal Farm, but that was when I was in year 8 and we didn't do anything too critical on it. But if I'd have picked this up like in my teens after school maybe, I don't think, me personally as a person, I don't think I would have had much understanding, but now I don't know, I feel like maybe because I've read a lot more now, I'm diving into different kind of genres and stuff like that, and my thought process is a lot more mature in some ways. I feel like I got so much out of this, and I'm so glad that I picked it up at the time that I did. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So I do go into a few more points, such as like this relationship that builds, and other things in my Goodreads review, which is a written review. My Goodreads link, as usual, is always in the description down below if you do want to check that out, because I've got a few more points I don't talk about here. But yeah, those were just the points that I really wanted to discuss and talk a little bit more freely on. Ironically, because you cannot talk really freely in this book. But yeah, let me know if you have read this, what you thought about it, your sort of interpretations of the content within. I'd be very interested. I feel like I'm probably geeking out about this now. Like, this was so phenomenal. Like, what a weird world, and a world that is quite possible and is possible and has been possible to some extent in the past, in the current, you know. It's just fantastic. So yeah, I'm gonna go back and probably read Animal Farm again, because I don't know if I ever finished it when I was at school. But yeah, that is something that I do want to read. I feel like there's a film, right? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen, maybe that's Charlotte's Web, I don't know, I just remember a farm kind of film. I feel like there's a film, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's all for now. I'm getting kind of rambly. I'm gonna go out to the cinema and watch Joker. Have a lovely day. Let me know what you're up to today, and I'll speak to you in another video soon. Bye.